Hi there. In this lecture we see an absolutely fascinating game of Capablanca played against David Janowski. This is in 1924, the New York tournament, round 15. Knight f3 from Capablanca at d5. g3. Capablanca is playing a King's Injured attack. Check out my King's Injured attack course. It's a very good system. It has been used by world champions such as Capablanca, like in this game. And he navigates it after c5, actually, believe it or not, into a kind of Benoni, modern Benoni structure in reverse. The absolute heyday of the modern Benoni was in the 60s, 1950s to 60s, because Mikhail Tal was a major exponent. Tal said of Capablanca, by the way, you have to study Capablanca to learn how to play chess. And maybe this kind of game was extremely fascinating to Tal, who was a leading modern Benoni exponent. We have here e5, c4, d4. We're just basically heading into a Benoni structure in reverse. After bishop d6, e3, knight g, e7, e takes, c takes. Here we are. Now in the Benoni, to understand that structure, we understand we have a queenside pawn majority. We understand we have pressure on the e-file. We understand we have an Achilles heel. And if black can arrange pieces against d3, it could be unpleasant. Now, usually, if you're playing white against Benoni, if this was truly in reverse, there'll be a knight on f6, and maybe later coming to c5 and bishop f5 and playing for e4 break and stuff like that. So the knight maybe is not optimal on e7 compared to f6 in relation to this pawn. An interesting aspect of this game is, for me, that we have these pawn structure kind of template plans, but we've always got to factor in the tactical dynamics move by move. There's a kind of tension between templated pawn structure moves and making sure you notice the weakness of the last moves pedantically. So if you can combine the pedanticness with the thematicness, it's even more special, basically. Just bear that in mind, that point. So a3 is played, so it looks as though structurally, yeah, white wants to use the queenside pawn majority. White wants to use, like b4, and maybe even b5, and try and put pressure on e5 later. We have a5 stopping that. It seems very logical. Knight bd2, knight g6. So the plan for this knight is very different. It's not really going to torture d3. d3 torture is minimized in this game. That's one perk here, because of black's placement of pieces. We have rook e1, black castles, queen c2, and this does support the idea of c5 at some point. Rook e8 is not taken out as an option here. b3 is played. So c5 has to be borne in mind for black, though, as a possibility. We have h6, and now rook b1. And here is what I mean between this tension between thematic pawn structure plans and pedanticness. Pedantically, there is a weakness of the last move. a3 is a bit weaker. That needs to be factored in, really, here when playing rook b1. Bishop e6 is played, which kind of ignores this pedantic possibility. It's interesting to consider queen e7, which would tap into that, though, to nitpick, basically, white's thematic play, to nitpick at a3. What does white do? Go back with the rook? If white plays knight e4, let's have a look. Just sacking a pawn. Is c5 any good here? It looks visually quite interesting, with knight d6 support maybe. So this position, it ends up actually being dynamically, it's about equal, actually. This position, it ends up being equal. So it's fascinating to consider, nitpick the thematic plans, basically. If you have the thematic plans but also self-nitpick, it's even better. If bishop c7, then yeah, the advantage of rook b1 is shown. Thematically, we want to play b4, to play b5, to dislodge the knight, to make use of our semi-open, e-file pressure on e5. So this position is going to end up being glorious for white. Small edge, but white's getting what they want here. So anyway, yeah, queen e7 does seem like quite an accurate idea, nitpicking. But bishop e6, not nitpicking. We have now h4, and on this side of the board as well, this knight to be moved, as well as this knight, would mean e5 is more likely to be taken at some point. We have rook c8, and now c5 is used here. Bishop b8, and now knight c4, the pressure mounting on e5. f6. If king h8, h5, knight f8, knight c takes e5 is actually not possible. You might think this is possible. It's not. This would backfire. Bishop takes, knight takes. There's knight d7, so it's backfiring. White's not ready for this. White has to be ready to take out e5. So if we rewind there, forget that, one has to be a bit careful. So I'm just saying if king h8, h5 might be premature, a better way would be knight b6 and then b4, then try and dislodge, both knights, from e5, and then we can say, look at this version of this. It's a whole load safer to take out e5. So that would be glorious. That would be the culmination of dislodging knights from e5 support. Yeah, there's strain on the pieces to support the e5 pawn. So yeah, this kind of variation with knight b6 is fascinating. So anyway, this explains why support was given by the pawn of e5. So even if these knights are dislodged, it's not a total disaster now. We have bishop d2, but this doesn't mean that b4 is on the way. King h8, b4. This is glorious modern Benoni play. And it's because of, d3 is not really an exploitable weakness here. It's like all of the upsides of the Benoni without the downsides of d3 torture. Benoni translates to son of sorrow, apparently, and there's not much sorrow associated with d3 here. We have a takes, knight a7, queen c1 now, and this looks as though there's a tactical shot here, and black just ignores this. So this is almost a nitpicky move based on the weakness of the last move of bishop takes h6. A nitpicky move, because if bishop takes h6, c3 is weakened, which also happens to hit the rook. So Capablanca didn't play bishop takes h6, and he actually plays knight h2. Fascinating stuff. If bishop takes h6, first of all, we can clearly rule out g takes, because we're going to get our piece back immediately. So and we can even crash through after. With this, this is absolutely, demolishing black. Knight g4, there's too much pressure here to bear on the black position. For example, like this, what does black do? Black's lost here. 95, we're just taking, there's too much pressure to bear here. So anyway, even if we didn't have that follow-up, we're going to get our piece back there. But the problem is, nitpicking, knight c3. What does white do? Rook b2. It just ends up, because of e4, this is an interesting strategic break, and then it ends up in this situation where, okay, we can get our piece back, but black should be, okay, they've liberated that bishop, there's pressure on the king side, it's even. So anyway, Capablanca avoids the temptation of bishop takes h6 in a nutshell. He plays knight h2. This doesn't mean that b7 is under fire. e4 is available to be used by the bishop. There are light square weaknesses around the king here, which are interesting. So we see queen e7 protects b7 at least, among other things. Rook a1, and actually, Capablanca's nitpicking knight b5 with the bishop on d2 supporting c3. There's an idea of rook a5 here. We have rook c7, rook a5, bishop d7, and now knight b6. So fascinating to take out d7 to undermine b5 a bit. We have bishop c6, queen c4 hitting b5. It's been a big excuse for a lot of pressure now, that knight on b5. So the knight goes back to a miserable location, and now knight d5 wins basically the light square bishop, and black has already compromised on the light square. So this is really glorious. How the light square domination now is glorious after bishop takes d5, unless black wants to lose the rook. So bishop takes, queen takes. We have f5, which weakens e5 now. So there are some issues here. to factor in this position. But let's go with the game. F5, Queen F3. If H5 instead, Knight F8, Knight F3, this position should also kind of be very nice for white. Taking out A7, for example, is going to be a big advantage. So that's on E4. If the knight moves, then actually, the bishop's an issue on B8. This position with knight H4 is horrible. Bishop takes B7. This is just getting horrible. Black's in a really bad way here, losing pawns. So just to illustrate anyway, so Queen F3 though was played. H5 was plausible. Queen F6, and now H5 now in any case, knight E7. And now a beautiful move, trying to open up these light squares to amplify this bishop. Amplification strategy. What would you play here to open up the light squares? A little bit more for 100 points. Yeah? G4. The king's safe enough to handle this. F4. We've got the E4 square now. And Queen E4 is played. Knight EC6. Rook A1. Rook C E7. Queen G6. We have Queen F8. If Queen takes G6, H takes King G8. This position is quite dominating. White's kind of dominating here in this scenario. There are lots of possibilities for exerting more pressure here on both sides of the board. For example, this sort of plan, or G5. There's lots of plans, richness of plans there for white. So Queen F8 is played. Knight F3. Rook E6. And now a glorious tactical positional move. What would you play here for 10 points? Yeah, Knight H4. Not minding rook takes. Rook F6. If rook takes, we're forking king and queen. We've just won the exchange. And we've got B5 here as well. This position is crashing through. So rook F6. We have bishop E4, Queen G8. And now bishop D5. Very spicy stuff. If queen takes, then it's queen takes E8. Knight E7 is played. Just to put that on the board. Queen takes E8 check. And knight G6. And we're going to be mating with queen H8. What does black do here? Ouch. Rook takes, H takes his mate. Ouch. So anyway, knight E7 is played. We have now a nice tactical move. Queen takes F6. Yeah, I mean, it is a magnificent position. If queen F8, there's lots of options for white. Just to retreat the queen even, if needed, for knight G6. So knight E7, but this loses the exchange. Queen takes F6, because we've got bishop takes G8. So black's the exchange down now. F3, supporting G4, F5. And here, now, a tactic. What would you play here tactically? 10 points. Bishop takes F4, yeah. We want to smash down this E file. And we're threatening bishop takes E5 check. So that dissuades F takes G4, it seems. So that E5 is supported. Knight G6 check, King H7. Bishop takes E5 anyway. Now, supported by the knight on G6. Whoa. Black is crumbling. Knight takes. Rook takes. Yeah, because this is a welcome simplification. Rook takes A7 here. So all of the G files kind of stifled any plan on G file, and B7's dropping. Poor majority here. This game has been ahead of its time, I've got to say. This is one of the more mysterious games so far. It's like really crushing Benoni in reverse. Like 30 years ahead of its time. 30 years. It's like Capablanca is very fluent with the pawn structures, but mixing with pedanticness, nitpickingness with weakness in the last move, and that's even more formidable, more effective. The nuances, factor in the nuances as well as the thematic play, and then you've got an even more dangerous, player in theory. But here, yeah, if the game continued, black resigned. If the game continued, rook takes B7, King G2. This is just absolutely winning. we're 4 pawns up. Absolutely winning. Absolutely gorgeous stuff. Yeah, we only have, we should be careful about a cheapo with bishop h2 check. Be alert to a cheapo. So it's good to put the king on the other side of the road to the bishop to avoid nasty road accidents on the chessboard. So anyway, this would be absolutely crushing. So anyway, rook takes a7 was the end of the game. This is really an amazing game in my view. I mean, I'm also a fan of Tal, and this game is like a bridge game between literally Tal's opening repertoire and tactics and positional understanding. It's one which I think would have made Tal smile for sure, seeing a Benoni in reverse like this in full effect without too many of the downsides being revealed of the Benoni. The Benoni is not so popular nowadays because plans were well worked out against the weak pawn, and in general thematic, pawn break e4, which we only get a glimpse of, an e4 pawn break in reverse, for e5 pawn break when you're playing white against Benoni. We only get a glimpse of some issues here. It's like a luxury version of the Benoni here in this game. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this game as much as me. Really an amazing game ahead of its time. Okay, thanks very much.